The public humiliation. It was supposed to be the wedding of the year. 300 guests, fresh orchids, the Salcombe estuary sparkling in the background. Everything was perfect until my own parents stood up in the middle of the ceremony. In front of admirals, billionaires, and the press, they pointed at my groom and screamed, "Someone like you has no right to start a family with a Landry." The music stopped. The room went dead silent. They thought they had finally broken me. The secret. You see, they hated Ethan because he was a mechanic who drove a battered Land Rover. They gave me an ultimatum: marry a rich man they chose or lose my inheritance. They thought they held all the cards. But there was one thing my parents didn't know. 10 months ago, I received a secret letter from a Swiss bank, a letter my grandfather wrote before he died, and it changed everything. The public humiliation. It was supposed to be the wedding of the year. 300 guests, fresh orchids, the Salcombe estuary sparkling in the background. Everything was perfect until my own parents stood up in the middle of the ceremony. In front of admirals, billionaires, and the press, they pointed at my groom and screamed, "Someone like you has no right to start a family with a Landry." The music stopped. The room went dead silent. They thought they had finally broken me. The STA. Subscribe request. If you want to see exactly how I destroyed my toxic parents without raising my voice, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss the moment the trap snaps shut. Drop a like if you believe respect is thicker than blood. The trap. We didn't cancel the wedding. We let them humiliate us. We let them scream. Why? Because we needed an audience. While they were busy planning their cruel speech, Ethan and I spent 10 months quietly buying up every single share of the family company. We weren't walking down the aisle to get married. We were walking down the aisle to take over. The climax tease. At the altar, instead of saying "I do," I pulled 2 black legal binders out of my bouquet. I looked my father in the eye and said one sentence that stripped them of their fortune, their company, and their home in exactly 90 seconds. Stay tuned, because the best revenge isn't loud, it's legal. Hi, I'm Paige Nicole Landry, 33, from Salcombe, Devon. It was supposed to be the perfect wedding. 300 guests, fresh orchids cascading from the beams, the Salcombe estuary sparkling through the glassed walls of the marquee, champagne flowing, everyone clapping and smiling, until my own parents suddenly shot up from their seats right in the middle of the aisle. They pointed a trembling finger straight at my groom and screamed in front of everyone, "Someone like you has no right to start a family with a Landry." Dead silence. You could hear the ice melt in the crystal glasses. I didn't cry. I just smiled, took his hand, and we walked up to the stage together. He looked down at them and said one sentence. I followed with another. That was it. 300 jaws dropped at the same time. A few champagne flutes actually slipped and shattered on the marble floor. While everyone was still frozen, I grabbed the microphone and looked right into the camera. Have your own parents ever humiliated you in front of hundreds of people on the biggest day of your life? Drop a 1 in the comments if yes, a 2 if no, and tell me the worst thing they ever said to you. Because what happened next? Stay until the end. Trust me, the payback is worth every second. Everything started exactly 10 months earlier, the day I brought him home to meet my parents for the first time. I'd been putting it off for months, but we'd just gotten engaged and there was no avoiding it anymore. I picked him up from the small boatyard where he worked on custom restorations. He showed up in his 15-year-old Land Rover Defender, faded navy t-shirt, jeans with varnish stains on the knees, and boots that had definitely seen better days. I kissed him anyway and told him he looked perfect. He laughed and said, "Your dad's gonna love this truck." The Landry estate sits right on the water, 30 acres of manicured lawn sloping down to a private deep-water pontoon where the family's 60-foot classic motor yacht is tied up year-round. As we rolled up the crushed gravel driveway, I watched Ethan take it all in quietly. No comment, no wide eyes, just that calm half-smile he always wears when he's reading a situation. Victor opened the door himself. The first thing he did was look past me straight at the muddy Defender, and the corner of his mouth curled like he'd smelled something rotting. Evelyn appeared behind him in pearls in a linen dress, took one glance at Ethan's boots on the limestone foyer, and actually lifted a hand to her nose for half a second. Dinner was worse than I'd imagined. Victor started before the starters even arrived. "So, Ethan, what exactly do you do for a living?" "I restore and refit yachts," Ethan answered, cutting his tomato like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Restore," Victor repeated, drawing the word out, "meaning you're a mechanic." "Pretty much, and a shipwright." "And your monthly take-home, ballpark?" "Dad," I warned. "It's a fair question, Paige. We're talking about the future of this family." Ethan just shrugged, enough to keep the lights on and the Landy running. Evelyn set her fork down with a delicate clink. "The Landry family has certain standards. Our son-in-law needs to own a super yacht over 50 meters, minimum. It's not negotiable." I felt the heat rise in my face, but Ethan reached under the table and squeezed my knee. Steady, calm, like he expected every word. After dessert, Victor asked to speak to me alone in his study. He closed the heavy oak door, walked to the credenza, and slid 3 thick folders across the desk. For Roddy's youngest son, 35, polo player, 2 yachts already. Lurson Eyre, 32, speaks 4 languages, winter house instead. Bennetty Boy, 36, just took the company public, net worth north of $400 million. He tapped the folders one by one. Pick one or walk away from everything. The trust, the shares, the name. Your choice, Paige. I stared at the glossy photos of 3 men smiling on teak decks under the Mediterranean sun. None of them were Ethan. I didn't say a word. I just turned and left the room. When I found Ethan in the foyer, he was studying an old black and white photo on the wall. My grandfather, Theodore, standing proud on the bow of the very first Landry yacht built in 1946. Ethan's finger traced the hull number like he already knew every curve of it. He asked, "Are you okay?" I whispered, "No, but I will be." That night, driving back to my flat in Exeter, I made a promise to myself. Whatever happened next, I was done letting them decide who I was allowed to love. I thought my parents' ultimatum was the end of the road, but 2 days later, a letter arrived from a private bank in Zurich that changed everything. It wasn't just a statement, it was a key to a door my parents didn't even know existed.
The engagement party ambush. Every Sunday, I still drove out to the estate for the obligatory family dinner. I sat at the same mahogany table, ate the same roast beef, and listened to the same lecture. "You're throwing your life away on that grease monkey," Victor said one night, waving his fork like a baton. "The Nautilus Air is flying in from Oslo next weekend, private jet into Exeter. You will be at the airport to greet him." Evelyn chimed in. "We've already told our friends you're reconsidering. It would be humiliating to retract the invitation now." I smiled, refilled their wine glasses with Bordeaux, and said absolutely nothing. Later in the cloakroom, I caught my reflection in the gilded mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. Calm, collected, counting days. Each night when I got home, Ethan was waiting on the harbor wall behind my flat, feet dangling over the water, working on a scale model of a classic sloop. I'd sit beside him, rest my head on his shoulder, and whisper the countdown. 91 days, 87, 74. He never asked what my parents said anymore. He already knew. Instead, he just carved another tiny rib into the model hull and answered, "Getting closer." Some nights, we spread the corporate organizational chart across my kitchen table and played chess with real stakes. Brooke would highlight directors still loyal to Victor. Ethan would circle lenders who owed him favors. I would draw quite a few arrows showing exactly where the votes would fall when we finally called the meeting. We never raised our voices. We never rushed. We moved like the tide. Slow, relentless, impossible to fight once it turns. By the time the leaves on the Dart estuary turned red and gold, every piece was in position. The share registry reflected my Class A and Ethan's Class B holdings. The bond assignment was locked in an escrow account in London. The special shareholders meeting notice sat drafted and undated on Brooke's desk, ready to be filed at company's house the morning after the wedding. All that remained was the performance. Victor thought he was directing the final act. He had no idea the curtain was already coming down on him. The official engagement party took place on a perfect October Saturday at the Royal Dart Yacht Club. 220 guests, shipyard owners from Cowes to Clyde, brokers from Monaco, designers from Viagorio, filled the waterfront ballroom. White orchids cascaded from every beam, a string quartet played Vivaldi, and the sunset painted the harbor blood orange behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. I wore the pale champagne silk dress my mother had chosen. Ethan wore the navy suit we'd bought off the rack in Plymouth. He looked impossibly handsome and completely out of place among the dinner jackets and heirloom jewels. Victor waited until the champagne toast to make his move. He clinked his glass 3 times, climbed to the 3 steps to the little stage, and took the microphone like he owned the room, because he genuinely believed he did. He started soft, almost warm. Many of you have known Paige since she was a little girl running barefoot on these pontoons. I have never been more proud of the woman she has become. Polite applause, smiles all around. Then his voice dropped half a degree colder. But pride comes with responsibility. 78 years ago, my grandfather laid the keel of the first Landry yacht with his own hands. That legacy is not a gift, it is a duty. And duty demands that we surround ourselves with people who understand the weight of that name. His eyes locked on Ethan. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I will be deeply disappointed, no, ashamed, if my daughter chooses someone incapable of carrying that weight. A collective inhale. Phones that had been recording toasts suddenly angled toward the stage. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes already shining with practiced tears. She pressed manicured fingers to her lips, then let her hand fall dramatically. The Landry name has never accepted anything less than excellence. We simply cannot watch our only child throw away everything we built for someone unworthy. The whispers started immediately, sharp, excited, hungry. I felt Ethan's hand tighten around mine under the tablecloth. His palm was cool, steady. Old Harlan Whitmore, 83, retired chairman of the British Marine Federation, silver-haired, voice like gravel, pushed himself up from the head table with his cane. "Now hang on just a minute, Victor," he boomed. "I've known this young man since he was rebuilding wooden dinghies in his dad's garage. There isn't a better set of hands on the entire South Coast. You're out of line." Victor didn't even let him finish. "With respect, Harlan, you retired 15 years ago. Times have changed, standards have risen." He turned back to the crowd, smile razor thin. I'm sure we all understand the importance of protecting what took 3 generations to create. Harlan sat down slowly, face red. The whispers became open conversation. Someone laughed nervously. I felt the rage flare hot behind my ribs, but Ethan squeezed once, a calm weight. I swallowed it and forced the smile my mother had drilled into me since finishing school. A photographer from Yachting World leaned over. Is this real? Are they actually doing this in public? I just lifted my glass toward the stage in a mock toast. Victor kept going. Of course, Paige is free to make her own choices, but freedom has consequences. Certain doors close when you step outside the circle that raised you. Translation: marry Ethan and you're cut off. Evelyn dabbed non-existent tears with a monogrammed handkerchief while guests shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to clap or flee. Then the string quartet, God bless them, struck up Pachelbel as if nothing had happened, and the staff began circulating with dessert trays like trained seals. Ethan leaned close, lips barely moving. 10 more weeks. I answered the same way. 10. We walked out of that party holding hands, leaving my parents thinking they had won. They had no idea that while they were trying to shame us into submission, we were finalizing paperwork that would strip them of everything they held dear.
The takeover at the altar. We stayed another hour at the engagement party, a masterclass in endurance. I smiled for photographs, I thanked people for coming, I let cousins and second aunts kiss my cheek and whisper, "Are you sure, darling?" while eyeing Ethan like he'd crawled out of the bilge. When we finally escaped to the car park, the valet brought Ethan's Land Rover around. Victor's black Bentley was parked 3 spaces away, engine idling, driver at attention. My father stepped out of the shadows. "Last chance, Paige. End this nonsense tonight, and everything stays the way it's supposed to." I looked him straight in the eye for the first time in months. "Define supposed to, Dad." He blinked. That single word, Dad, instead of the formal father I'd used since university, threw him off balance for half a second. Ethan opened the passenger door for me. I climbed in without another word. As we pulled away, I watched in the side mirror, Victor standing alone under the portico lights, Evelyn rushing out to join him, both of them shrinking smaller and smaller until the truck turned onto the winding country lane and they disappeared. Ethan reached over and laced his fingers through mine. "They just handed us the perfect stage," he said quietly. I squeezed back, "and the perfect audience." Neither of us spoke again until we were across the dark crossing. 10 weeks, 70 days, 1,680 hours. We had never been more ready. The final 3 weeks felt like the calmest storm I'd ever lived through. Brooke scheduled the last closing on a Tuesday morning in a glass-walled conference room on the 22nd floor of a bank tower in the city of London. I signed the final transfer instructions while eating a croissant, cream cheese smearing on the margin of a document worth hundreds of millions. 42% Class A shares, 10-to-1 super voting power, now sat irrevocably in a brokerage account bearing only my name. The trustee in Geneva sent a one-line email. "Congratulations, Ms. Landry. You are now the controlling shareholder." 2 days later, Ethan closed on the last slice, exactly 0.03%, from an 89-year-old widow in Bournemouth, who had inherited the certificates from her late husband, a former Landry controller. She mailed them herself in bubble wrap and a Sainsbury's carrier bag. Ethan wired the money, scanned the endorsed certificates, and by Friday afternoon, the registrar at Companies House had updated the cap table. Combined, we owned 100% of voting control. The dual-class structure my grandfather created in 1998 had just become our personal lock and key. Brooke arrived at my flat that same evening carrying 2 identical black litigation binders, each 3 inches thick, gold lettering on the spine. Binder 1, Paige Nicole Landry Irrevocable Trust Full Distribution Package. Binder 2, Callahan Marine Capital, assignment of £35 million performance bond, Victor R. Landry personal guarantee. She set them on my coffee table like twin grenades with the pins already pulled. Everything is time-stamped, notarized, and ready for public filing the second you say go. Once these hit the company's house register, the board has to call a special meeting within 10 days. Victor won't even have time to hire King's counsel before he's voted out. I ran my fingers over the embossed seals. They felt heavier than the diamond on my left hand. Outside, the usual pre-wedding chaos continued like nothing had changed. Monday, final dress fitting at the little boutique in Totnes. The seamstress pinned the hem while my mother sat on the velvet chaise sipping champagne and critiquing the neckline. A Landry bride should show less shoulder, she declared. I just smiled and let the pins prick. Wednesday, floral walkthrough at the venue. Evelyn wanted all white roses flown in from Holland. I nodded, signed the addendum for peonies instead, and paid the difference myself. She never noticed. Thursday, pre-wedding photo shoot on the dock at sunset. The photographer kept shouting, "Closer! Happier!" while Ethan rested his chin on my head, and I laughed for real because the countdown on my phone had just flipped to single digits. Every evening, Victor or Evelyn called. Victor's version was always the same growl. "Have you come to your senses yet? That boy will never give you the life you deserve." Evelyn preferred tears. "Think of your children, Paige. Do you want them growing up without the Landry name on their birth certificates?" I kept my answers short, almost gentle. I know exactly what I'm doing. They took it as surrender. They couldn't have been more wrong. The night before the rehearsal dinner, Ethan and I sat on the bow of his little day sailor tied behind my building. The moon was almost full, silver on black water. He handed me a small velvet box. Not the ring box, something older. Inside was a brass builder's plate from the very first Landry yacht, hull number 001, built in 1946. My grandfather had kept it on his desk until the day he died. I pulled it out of storage last week. Thought it should go on whatever we build first after all this is over. I traced the raised letters with my thumb. "You already know what we're naming her." He smiled. "Redemption has a nice ring to it." We stayed out there until the tide turned, planning nothing and everything at once. When we finally climbed back onto the pontoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. "Both binders stand encrypted. Courier leaves for the High Court at 8:01 a.m. tomorrow. Sleep well, Ms. Controlling Shareholder." I showed Ethan the message. He kissed my forehead. "Tomorrow we stop pretending," he whispered. I leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. "No," I corrected softly. "Tomorrow we start collecting." The wedding morning was crisp and cold, a perfect English winter day. As I walked down the aisle, I wasn't shaking with nerves, I was shaking with anticipation. I knew my parents had prepared a speech to humiliate us. I just hoped they were ready for my reply.
The morning of the wedding broke clear and cold, the kind of December day that makes the Dart estuary look like polished steel. 300 guests filled the historic chapel. Admirals in dress uniforms, European shipyard owners in bespoke Savile Row suits, reporters from every yachting magazine on the planet. Phones were supposed to be off, but half the room was already live streaming. I stood just outside the massive oak doors in my grandmother's 1952 lace veil, heart hammering so hard I could hear it over the organ prelude. Brooke slipped me the 2 black binders through the vestry window 5 minutes earlier. They were now tucked inside the bouquet of white peonies, hidden but close enough to feel their weight against my ribs. The music swelled. The doors opened. I stepped inside. 20 feet down the aisle, Victor and Evelyn rose from the front pew in perfect, rehearsed unison. Victor's face was purple, Evelyn clutched her pearls like a rosary, and together, loud enough for the back row to hear every syllable, they screamed, "Someone like you has no right to start a family." The organ hit a wrong chord and stopped dead. 300 heads snapped toward them. A dozen phones swung up. I froze for half a heartbeat, then smiled. The calmest, sweetest smile I had practiced in the mirror for months. I did not walk the rest of the aisle. I turned, took Ethan's hand, and together we climbed the 3 steps to the altar platform that doubled as a stage. The vicar stepped aside without a word. I lifted the microphone first. "Today I want to thank my parents for that sentence," I said, voice perfectly steady because it just reminded me it's time to tell the truth. The room was so quiet, I could hear the harbor gulls outside. Ethan took the mic next. "Landry Yachts, as of this moment, belongs 100% to my wife and me." We raised the binders in perfect synchronization. My left hand, the complete trust distribution package, 42% Class A shares, super voting, irrevocable. His right hand, the £35 million performance bond with Victor's personal guarantee, now owned outright by Callahan Marine Capital. Gasps rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. Someone in the 3rd row actually dropped their phone. Victor lunged forward. "This is absurd. Those documents are forgeries." Brooke's voice cut through from the side aisle, cool and professional. "Already filed with Company's House and the High Court at 8:01 this morning, Mr. Landry. Public record. Feel free to check." Victor's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. Evelyn screamed, "You can't do this. We built that company." I looked straight at her. "No, Mother. My grandfather built it. You just spent it." A low rumble rolled through the guests, shock turning into something closer to awe. Harlan Whitmore started slow clapping from his wheelchair. Within seconds, half the room joined in. "Not for my parents?" he tried one last time. "Security, remove these 2 immediately." 2 uniformed security guards stepped forward, then stopped when the chief constable, who was on the guest list, raised a single finger. No one was going anywhere. Ethan leaned into the microphone again. "Oh, and the bank syndicate has been notified. The £35 million demand letter goes out at 9 tomorrow morning. Personal assets first, of course." Evelyn fainted, or pretended to. Someone caught her anyway. I looked out over the sea of stunned faces, found my father's eyes, and spoke the line I had waited 10 months to deliver. "You taught me that blood is thicker than water, Dad. Turns out, money is thicker than both." The organist, bless her, struck up the recessional on instinct. Ethan and I walked back down the aisle, not as bride and groom yet, but as the new owners of everything my parents thought they controlled. Behind us, Victor was screaming at lawyers on his phone. Evelyn was being fanned by cousins who suddenly remembered they hated her. We didn't look back. At the chapel doors, Brooke handed us the marriage schedule, already signed by the vicar. We added our names in black ink, dated it, and she disappeared to file that too. The photographer caught the exact moment, Ethan kissing my forehead while 300 people stood frozen inside, mouths open, watching their entire social order flip upside down in 90 seconds. That photo ran on the cover of Yachting World the next week with the headline, "Wedding of the Year or Hostile Takeover?" Both. We never finished the ceremony that day. We didn't need to. The vows we really cared about had just been spoken in front of the only witnesses that mattered. 7 months later, the new brass letters on the yard gates already read Landry Callahan Yachts. The change happened the same week Victor's removal became official. The board meeting lasted 11 minutes. He didn't even get to finish his prepared speech. Evelyn lost signing authority on every account the same afternoon. The estate on the 730 acres, the only home I'd ever known, went to auction in April. A tech billionaire from Seattle bought it unseen. The classic 60-foot motor yacht my grandfather loved more than most people was sold in Palma to cover the final margin call. I watched the live stream from our new office and felt exactly nothing. Victor and Evelyn turned on each other faster than anyone predicted. Court filings in Exeter were brutal. Hidden accounts, affairs, decades of quiet contempt finally exploding into public view. The divorce was final 91 days after the wedding that never finished. Neither of them walked away with the Landry name still attached to anything that mattered. We did something quieter. We built a 68-meter Explorer. Steel hull, ice class, the most beautiful thing to come out of the yard in 30 years. We christened her Paige and Ethan on a cloudless July morning with exactly 40 people on the bow. The welders who stayed when others jumped ship, the designer who believed in us from day one, Brooke, Harlan Whitmore in his wheelchair, and a handful of friends who never once asked about money. I broke the bottle against the bow myself. The champagne foamed across the white paint like forgiveness I never had to give. That same week, I wrote one letter, handwritten on heavy cream paper, no return address. Mom, Dad, thank you for the most expensive lesson I will ever learn. Never underestimate someone because they don't look the part you wrote for them. I used to think family meant unconditional love. Turns out it just means shared DNA. The people who choose you anyway, those are the ones who stay. I'm keeping the company, I'm keeping the man, I'm keeping the life we built without your permission. You taught me that blood is supposed to be thicker than water. I learned something better. Respect is thicker than blood. Be well, Paige. I mailed it from a tiny post office in Salcombe, then blocked every number, every email, every possible bridge back. Some doors aren't meant to stay open. We spend most of our time at sea now. The new yacht has a proper owner's cabin, aft teak soles worn soft by bare feet, and photographs of my grandfather on the bulkheads instead of oil paintings of strangers. Ethan still smells like varnish half the time. I still fall asleep to the sound of him sketching on the navigation table at 2 a.m. Sometimes people ask if I ever think about forgiveness. I think about the girl who once stood in that limestone foyer, praying her parents would just see her. I think about the woman who finally realized she never needed their approval to be whole. Forgiveness isn't the same as access. I forgave them the day I stopped needing anything from them. That's the real ending I want you to take with you. If someone in your life keeps measuring your worth by their ruler, by money, by status, by who they think you should love, remember this story. You don't have to burn the kingdom down to leave it. Sometimes you just walk away, build a better one, and never give them the new address. Love isn't inherited, it's chosen every single day. And the people who choose you when you have nothing, those are the ones who deserve you when you have everything.